Harry Potter, Journey to Godhood ch 11-20. Chapter 11, Joining Ravenclaw. The talk between Alaric and the two girls was going smoothly, and they were standing very close to each other, not paying attention to anyone around them. This made Hermione quite uncomfortable, and she felt that she was being ignored. "What on earth are you all discussing about standing so closely?" Hermione protested. "Can't you see I am also here?" "Calm down, Hermione," Alaric shrugged and turned to Marietta. "So, would you like to come in? There's still space here." "Of course," Marietta readily nodded and pulled the hesitating Cho Chang into the compartment. With the addition of the two girls, everyone became a bit reserved. No one spoke, and the atmosphere became awkward. Ultimately, Marietta broke the ice. She glanced at Alaric and then at everyone, and somewhat reluctantly asked, "Alaric, you look beautiful." Thanks, but how can you call a man beautiful? You should instead use handsome," Alaric complained. However, the truth was, as handsome as he was, he could indeed still be called beautiful. Mrs. Cole had more than once expressed that if Alaric were to cross-dress, he would be cuter than any girl. Hearing Marietta's comment, both Hermione and Cho Chang earnestly scrutinized Alaric, then blushed and looked away simultaneously. The atmosphere became even more awkward. Helplessly, Alaric recalled his original purpose, getting Hermione into Ravenclaw. "So," he deliberately asked, "are you two also first-year students?" "No, we entered Hogwarts last year and now we are already in our second year," Cho Chang shook her head. "I am your senior in this school, so you should call me with respect," Marietta added. "All right, senior," Alaric rolled his eyes. "So, which house are you in?" "We're both in Ravenclaw," the two girls said in unison. "Ah, Ravenclaw," Alaric pretended to nod thoughtfully. "I hope I'll also be sorted into Ravenclaw this year." "How about you, Hermione?" "Gryffindor," Hermione replied. "I heard they say Gryffindor is the best." "Gryffindor is not the best, Ravenclaw is," Cho Chang retorted. "Exactly," Marietta agreed. "People from Gryffindor always try to sell their house to others, but in reality, they're just a bunch of stupid and reckless fools." "You're biased," Hermione pointed out sharply. "No, I also think Ravenclaw is the best," Alaric supported Cho Chang and Marietta, explaining, "Wizards gain power through knowledge. Ravenclaw represents wisdom and knowledge, which is what wizards should pursue." He concluded, "Although courage, diligence, and shrewdness are essential for wizards, wisdom and knowledge are their essence." Marietta and Cho Chang both clapped. "Well said. You'll surely become an excellent Ravenclaw. Professor Flitwick will be pleased to meet you." After carefully considering Alaric's words, the proud Hermione had to nod. "I have to admit your reasoning. Now, I also hope to be sorted into Ravenclaw." Saying this, her face turned slightly red. Unfortunately, sorting is ultimately decided by the sorting hat. "If you're unlucky, you might be sorted into another house," Marietta regretfully reminded. However, having read the original work, Alaric immediately came up with a solution. "I heard from others that there is a way to influence the sorting hat's decision. As long as you keep thinking about which house you want to be in, the sorting hat will take your opinion into consideration. You can give it a try. If successful, we can stay in the same house." When he said the last sentence, he stared seriously into Hermione's eyes. Blushing under the gaze of such a handsome guy, Hermione's face turned red as she whispered, "Understood, I will try." Next, the four of them enthusiastically discussed Ravenclaw. Cho Chang and Marietta introduced Ravenclaw House, and then Alaric and Hermione gave their evaluations. Cho Chang and Marietta sometimes agreed and supported, sometimes vehemently opposed, and then continued the introduction, creating a lively cycle. The four of them chatted happily, not even noticing that the train had already departed. At around 12:30, a smiling, dimple-faced woman pushing a trolley passed by the compartment. All four bought some snacks from her and happily exchanged and ate. Alaric declined Marietta's Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, as he didn't want to risk tasting flavors like booger. However, Hermione was interested and boldly ate several, only to be scorched by a chili-flavored bean, making her gulp down several cups of water. What truly caught Alaric's interest were the chocolate frogs, particularly the collectible moving cards. These cards with animated characters gave him a bold idea to use this technology to create a collectible trading card game, similar to Magic, The Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Hearthstone. He knew that in the wizarding world, games like wizard chess were popular, and collecting chocolate frog cards was a widespread hobby. Therefore, developing a trading card game in the wizarding world would undoubtedly have potential, and he could use this as an opportunity to become wealthy. He even thought of hiring Ravenclaw students to develop and manufacture the cards. This technology wasn't particularly advanced in the field of alchemy, and students would likely be willing to earn some extra galleons during their free time. During this period, he could identify truly talented young wizards and officially hire them after graduation. I'm a genius, Alaric thought, feeling a bit proud of himself. However, his thoughts were interrupted by an unexpected event. Chapter 12, Neville, Harry, Ron, and Conflict. A round-faced chubby boy knocked on the compartment door. "Sorry," he said tearfully, "I wanted to ask, have you seen my toad?" All four shook their heads, and he immediately burst into tears. "I've lost it again. It always tries to run away from me." "It's okay, we'll help you find it together," Hermione volunteered. Then, she suddenly remembered something and turned to ask, "You all will help too, right?" Of course, this fits Hermione's character. Thinking this, Alaric reluctantly stood up and replied, "Fine, I'll help look too." Cho Chang and Marietta looked at each other, initially ready to mind their own business, but seeing the new friends they just made, they sighed and reluctantly joined the search. Seeing this scene, the round-faced boy was moved to tears. "Thank you. Thank you all. I'm Neville Longbottom. Thank you for helping me find Trevor." Alaric comfortingly patted his head. "It's okay, we're all classmates, and classmates should help each other. Besides," he paused, a bit proud, finding things should be left to the professionals. Under the puzzled looks of the others, he shouted, "Himari!" With a meow, a cute little white cat emerged from Alaric's backpack and gracefully leaped into the boy's arms. "What a cute kitten!" Cho Chang and Marietta, who hadn't noticed Himari before, were instantly captivated. Alaric affectionately patted the cat's head. "Himari, we're looking for a toad. Its owner is him, remember?" While saying this, he pointed to Neville. Himari approached, sniffed Neville's scent, and then meowed to show understanding. Satisfied, Alaric nodded and put Himari on the ground. "Let's go then," he ordered. With his command, Himari elegantly strolled down the train corridor, sniffing the air as she walked. Alaric led Neville and the three girls behind. "Can she really understand what you're saying?" Hermione asked. "Yes, Himari has intelligence similar to humans, so, of course, she can understand," Alaric replied. "Then she must be a magical creature," Marietta concluded. "Is she a Neasel, or a cat with Neasel ancestry?" "No, Himari is a cat demon," the boy denied. A.N. Himari is actually a cat demon from anime Omamari Himari. But I thought, it was a magical creature. "Yeah, I also don't think this cat is a demon, it may be a magical creature," Hermione eagerly answered. But this cat could indeed be a demon." Cho Chang nodded. "My dad told me that any creature, any animal, has the potential to become a demon if given the chance. Terrifying. Why would you raise a demon? If it were me, I would have never kept one." After hearing this, Neville was startled and involuntarily slowed down, walking to the back of the group. What's so scary about it? Himari is so cute. Exactly, Himari is not scary at all. Coward. The girls expressed disdain towards Neville. Generally, girls would be more afraid of strange things like this, but Himari's cuteness had captivated them. They all expressed, even if she is a demon, as long as she is cute, there's no problem. Indeed, in this world, beauty is justice. Alaric, somewhat emotional, patted his own face. It seems that my future is absolutely bright. After walking along the corridor for a while, Himari suddenly stopped, then entered a compartment. The five immediately followed. In the compartment, two boys were facing each other. One had black hair and glasses, and the other was a red-haired boy. Their clothes were a bit worn, and their appearances resembled the characters from the movies. Alaric guessed their identities at a glance: Harry Potter, the chosen one, and his sidekick, Ron Weasley, the one who would later marry Hermione. On the table in the compartment were snacks and wrappers. It seemed they were originally enjoying some food, but now, the black-haired boy curiously looked at Himari, while the red-haired boy huddled in fear, holding a squeaking mouse in one hand and a shabby wand in the other, randomly pointing it at Himari. There seemed to be a green light coming out of the tip of the wand. Alaric was startled by his actions, recalling that in the original book, Ron often had accidents when casting spells. Expelliarmus. Alaric flicked his wrist, and a purple wand appeared in his hand. A red light shot out from the wand tip and instantly hit the red-haired boy. He let out a miserable cry, and the wand in his hand flew out. With his other hand, Alaric casually reached out and effortlessly caught the flying wand. Cool. The boy with glasses exclaimed in admiration. You actually know magic. What's the name of that spell? Hermione asked excitedly. Cho Chang and Marietta were also impressed by this electrifying scene, applauding him with admiration. Thank you. Alaric nodded at them, then bent down and returned the shabby wand to Ron. Sorry about that, I didn't mean to do this, but next time, please don't point your wand at my Himari. Ron hesitated for a moment, then nodded in understanding, clutching his wand tightly. Himari, after completing her mission, jumped back into Alaric's backpack with a satisfied look on her face. Chapter 13, Toads and the Chosen One. Affected by Alaric's disarming charm, Ron Weasley seemed frightened. Even his speech was stuttering. I understand. He swallowed hard, finally regaining composure. I don't like cats, I thought she came in to eat Scabbers. Himari would never eat such strange things. Alaric shook his head. He knew that Scabbers, the rat, was actually the animagus Peter Pettigrew. However, he didn't intend to expose Peter, as doing so would put himself in a suspicious situation. How does a muggle who just entered the magical world know so much? Himari, in response, also mewed and distanced herself from Ron and his rat, apparently sensing something peculiar about Scabbers. Alaric casually picked up Himari and introduced himself to Harry and Ron. He also introduced the other four. Finally, he explained, we came here to help Neville find his toad. But Neville was sitting in this compartment originally, Harry Potter pointed out, puzzled. Neville behind them nodded in agreement. Now, the girls cast skeptical glances at Alaric. Watch, Himari never makes mistakes. Alaric sneered, and Himari cast a disdainful glance at the others, expressing her disdain for their doubts. She leaped from Alaric's shoulder, gracefully landed on a suitcase, and then used her cat's claws to scratch it. This is my luggage, Neville blurted out. Alaric gestured for him to open the bag. Himari means to say that your toad is hiding inside. Trevor can't be in there. I personally organized the suitcase, and I would have known if Trevor were in there. Neville muttered, but reluctantly opened the suitcase under Alaric's insistence. As expected, in line with Alaric's expectations, as soon as the suitcase was opened, a toad, as if finally liberated, jumped out. With the appearance of the toad, the truth was revealed. Neville had wasted a considerable amount of time going through each compartment, asking about Trevor. But in reality, Trevor had been left in his suitcase the entire time. Himera lifted her chin triumphantly, strutting back and forth before the group, looking like a proud rooster. Watching her adorable and proud demeanor, the girls' hearts melted. They spared no praise, thinking about how they could personally touch Himera. However, Himera ran back into her master's arms with an indifferent look, showing no love for the compliments from the girls. With the matter resolved, the two groups, who had just clashed moments ago, began introducing themselves. When the black-haired boy wearing glasses said his name, Harry Potter, there was an exclamation of surprise. "Is it really you?" Hermione was excited. "I know everything about you. Of course I bought a few extra reference books, a history of modern magic, the rise and fall of dark arts, important magical events of the 20th century, all of which mention you." Hearing this, Harry Potter had a bewildered expression. He never knew he was so famous. But, as a typical figure who fought against the Dark Lord and escaped death, Harry had long become a celebrity in the wizarding world. Cho Chang and Marietta couldn't help but take a closer look at him. Cho Chang had mostly lived in the Muggle world, only entering the wizarding world a year ago, so she had no real feelings about this. But Marietta was different. She even wanted to go forward and ask Harry for an autograph. Compared to them, Alaric was much calmer. He expressed a bit of surprise. Then had brief conversations with both Harry and Ron, the latter being somewhat neglected in Harry's shadow. Harry felt that Alaric wasn't just interested in his fame, while Ron was touched that Alaric didn't only pay attention to the renowned Harry Potter but also acknowledged him. Now, even the conflict a few minutes ago, where Alaric disarmed Ron's wand, was completely forgotten. Following that, Alaric bid farewell to them along with the girls and left. As they left, Ron cast an envious and jealous glance at Alaric's back. "He's just a bit better looking, isn't he?" Ron complained to Harry. "He can sit in the same compartment with 3 girls. Although he's a good guy, I bet anyone who walks with him wouldn't be noticed by any girl." Harry nodded in agreement. Although both of them thought Alaric was a good guy, boys tend to unite in their resentment against handsome guys. The so-called handsome guy, holding Himera, returned to the compartment with the 3 girls in a somewhat helpless manner. On the way, Hermione kept chatting with Marietta about Harry Potter and Voldemort. The two, one having read many books about the magical world and the other with parents working in the Ministry of Magic, were well informed, engaging in gossip topics and occasionally exclaiming in surprise. Cho Chang, on the other hand, listened attentively to their conversation, occasionally chiming in. Only Alaric, who wasn't very interested in gossip, had nothing to say and could only read his own book. Chapter 14, Disarming Charm and Scientific Theories. Reading alone wasn't boring for Alaric, but soon the girls shifted the topic to him. They discussed the spell he used and how he took out his wand. Hermione, who loved digging into details, was the first to ask him a question. "What spell did you use just now?" she inquired. "You instantly disarmed that redhead's wand." "That was the disarming charm," Alaric casually replied. "It's the most commonly used spell in wizard duels, and the incantation is Expelliarmus." "I know that." Marietta chimed in eagerly. "I remember, this charm was mentioned in defense against the dark arts class. But the teacher said we would learn it in higher grades. You can actually use such a complicated spell. How did you do it?" Hermione, also a muggle born like Alaric, was visibly affected. She couldn't wait to ask him for tips. "Actually," Alaric explained, "this spell is not complicated. It's even considered the simplest among the spells used in direct confrontation. Although it doesn't have a powerful offensive effect and can be easily blocked by various counter spells, it has an advantage that surpasses other spells. What advantage is that? Hermione asked impatiently. It's the shortest incantation among dual spells, and it can be cast the fastest. Using this spell often gives the caster the advantage of taking the initiative in magical duels. Upon hearing this explanation, Cho Chang and Marietta nodded in understanding, feeling admiration for Alaric's extensive knowledge. However, Hermione was still dissatisfied. She questioned, I have never seen such an answer in any book, Expelliarmus having the shortest incantation. Where did you read that? I haven't seen anyone mention the length of incantations in any magical books. This is my own conclusion. I compared several relatively simple dual spells, such as the stunning spell, the impediment jinx, the full body bind curse, and the dancing feet spell. After that, I arrived at this conclusion, Alaric replied. But since it's not mentioned in any books, how can you ensure that this is the correct conclusion? Remember, these books were written by the greatest wizards. Even they didn't say this. What makes you think you are right? Hermione challenged. Such a proud girl, unwilling to admit defeat at any time. Let me teach you a lesson. Thinking so, Alaric sternly criticized Hermione. Miss Hermione Granger, I assume you haven't studied Muggle science seriously since being admitted to Hogwarts, have you? Well, not really, but what does that have to do with Muggle science? Hermione blushed a bit and asked back. It has a lot to do with it. Although Muggle science lacks convenience and magic, it is very worthwhile to study in terms of logic and problem-solving methods. Even in the study of magic, you can add a thing or two, it can be used as a reference. For example, when researching the duration of incantations, I only need to maintain my magical power and energy in an equally abundant state. Using the same volume, the same speed, and clear pronunciation, I cast different spells and record the time taken for each. This way, I can roughly compare the lengths of the incantations. This is the controlled variable method used in science, Alaric explained seriously. Finally, he concluded, the spirit of science tells us that practice is the only way to find the truth. Blindly believing in authority is not advisable. Even the theories of the great scientists like Newton have been proven not to be absolute truths in modern times, and they have limitations in many aspects. So, why do you think that the wizards who wrote these textbooks are absolutely correct? After all, magic is not as rigorous as science in terms of precision. If these predecessors' words are completely correct, how are new spells created? After all, their books did not mention these spells. Following your reasoning, the entire wizarding world would never progress. This explanation left Marietta, who came from a wizarding family, confused indeed. Many wizards lacked logical reasoning abilities. But Hermione Granger, who came from a Muggle family and had long been in the Muggle world, barely understood what Alaric was saying. This kind of thinking, I've never heard of it before. Cho Chang looked admiringly at her fellow Muggle-born. Using scientific methods to study magic, you're really a genius. Hermione, on the other hand, felt a bit teary-eyed from Alaric's words. She had always considered herself intelligent and was unwilling to admit defeat to Alaric. However, Alaric's theory was reasonable, leaving her unable to refute. She found herself in an embarrassing situation. She wanted to argue but couldn't, and she wanted to apologize but felt embarrassed. In the end, she chose to apologize. Sorry, she whispered. I admit I was wrong. But before she finished speaking, she ran out crying. Chapter 15, Ambiguity and Education. A boy, in his early 20s, after combining his two lifetimes, managed to make a little girl, the female protagonist, cry. That's quite an achievement. It's embarrassing for a man in his 20s after adding his two lives to make an 11-year-old girl cry, and it's not something he can boast about. Although his physical age is only 11, Alaric hasn't consciously realized it and hasn't lived as a child. Perhaps, before the age of 7, Alaric might have pretended in front of others, but as he grew older, he became more accustomed to handling things in his own way. In the eyes of others, this made him unusually mature for his age. Seeing the little girl crying and leaving the compartment, he sighed helplessly and chased after her. "I always feel like he is so mature," Marietta said, watching Alaric's back. "I feel the same way," Cho Chang nodded in agreement. "Other boys of the same age only know how to sulk, they never take the initiative to admit mistakes and comfort girls." In the corridor, Hermione looked at the scenery speeding by outside the window, intentionally not turning around to let Alaric see her teary eyes. "All right, don't be angry. Is it okay if I admit I was wrong?" Alaric approached, habitually patting Hermione's fluffy head, just like he did with Himari. This time, it was as if he had stepped on a cat's tail. Hermione turned around angrily, coquettishly saying, "Don't touch my hair. I'm not a little kid anymore." Her sudden turn almost made her collide with Alaric's face. Then, the first thing she saw was Alaric's ambiguous smile, and the distance between their cheeks was less than 5 centimeters. Hermione's face blushed again, and she quickly turned her head. "Why are you following me out?" she whispered. "Isn't it because I saw a little girl crying at the drop of a hat? I'm afraid her tears will flood the train, so I chased after her to stop her," Alaric replied. This sounded even more like teasing a child. "I won't flood the train with my tears," Hermione refuted reflexively, then immediately realized that Alaric was teasing her. So, she angrily used her small fists to punch him twice. "All right, don't be sulky. Crying won't solve any problems," Alaric said, holding the hand that she had just used to punch him. This made Hermione's face even redder. She had never been treated like this by a boy being touched on the head and holding hands. Unfortunately, Alaric not only lacked romantic experience but also had no intention of dating an 11-year-old girl right now. In such a situation, he would naturally do things to disrupt the atmosphere. He began lecturing Hermione. In fact, having different opinions is common in learning and research. When someone holds a different opinion from you, you shouldn't argue with them out of anger. Instead, carefully consider whether their point of view is reasonable and acceptable. If their view is more reasonable, we need to actively learn and incorporate it into our knowledge system. Conversely, we need to think about the flaws in their view and refute them. So, crying won't solve the problem. These words were like a teacher educating a student. The ambiguous atmosphere was immediately shattered, but Hermione was, after all, a unique little school tyrant. She vaguely nodded in understanding. However, she felt a bit uncomfortable in her heart, and for Alaric, she inexplicably harbored a bit of unreasonable dissatisfaction. If Cho Chang and Marietta were present, they would definitely say that they were two weirdos. "Alaric," Hermione said very formally after listening. "You are indeed a knowledgeable person and good at learning. After entering Hogwarts, can I consult you?" Facing the serious request from her, Alaric happily replied, "Of course, I'm happy to chat with such a cute girl like you." Sometimes, he indeed forgets his way of speaking and says things that can be misunderstood. Hearing such words, Hermione, who had just returned to normal, blushed again and hurriedly returned to the compartment. Inside the compartment, Cho Chang and Marietta, who were eavesdropping on the door, had initially placed their ears against the door, wanting to overhear what Alaric and Hermione were talking about in the corridor, how Alaric would comfort Hermione, and what would happen. Unfortunately, Hermione had walked too far out when she first left, and the place where the two were chatting was far from the compartment door. As a result, Cho Chang and Marietta didn't hear anything. Now that Hermione had returned, blushing, they rushed back to their original positions. Pretending to eat snacks and chat, they managed not to let Hermione and Alaric notice anything unusual. Chapter 16, Hogwarts Castle and Professor McGonagall. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sky had darkened, and the train was finally approaching Hogwarts Castle. Alaric happily chatted with the three girls the entire afternoon, and they became friends. Although he had never had a romantic relationship or many female friends before the transmigration, dealing with a few girls was no problem. As they packed their belongings and prepared to disembark, a commotion and fighting noises erupted outside the door. Alaric listened carefully and recognized the voices of Harry and Ron. Additionally, there was a distinctive arrogant voice, which must be Draco Malfoy. In Alaric's impression, Draco Malfoy wasn't a genuinely bad kid. Born into a sacred 28 pure-blood wizard family, influenced by his parents and relatives who were Death Eaters, he developed a selfish and arrogant character, especially towards Muggles. However, due to Alaric being a Muggle himself, he naturally stood in opposition to Malfoy. So, even knowing Malfoy's true nature, Alaric didn't want to have much interaction with this pure-blood wizard. After all, dealing with naughty kids was troublesome. Moreover, Alaric's current focus was on two things: researching magic and increasing his powers and building good friendships with Hermione. He planned to use the influence and changes on Hermione to verify his speculations and research on the plot. On the one hand, his energy was limited, and influencing one person was more convenient than three. On the other hand, compared to boys, he preferred interacting with cute girls. So, for now, he didn't intend to purposefully have much contact with Harry and Ron. He listened to the sounds outside the door, where Malfoy and his two lackeys, Crabbe and Goyle, were arguing with Harry and Ron. Then, a brawl ensued, and Malfoy was bitten by Scabbers, after which both groups went their separate ways. Finally, after a long journey, the train sounded its whistle, and its speed gradually slowed down. In the night, the tall black shadow of Hogwarts loomed closer and closer. At last, they arrived at their destination, Alaric's long-awaited magical school. The students pushed and shoved, one after another, squeezing off the train. Taking advantage of his strength, Alaric led the three girls through the crowd, creating a bloody path. After getting off the train, they were greeted by a small platform, and a loud voice shouted, "First-year students! First-year students, come over here." The owner of the voice specifically mentioned Harry Potter. Alaric knew this was Hagrid, the gamekeeper of Hogwarts. He quickly and casually said goodbye to the two second-year students, Cho Chang and Marietta, then took Hermione and headed toward the source of the sound. Being led by a boy like this made Hermione a bit uncomfortable, but she pretended to be calm and followed along. Hagrid, with his giant bloodline, had a towering figure that exceeded various basketball players, visible from afar. All the new students followed him, stumbling along a small path, approaching a magnificent view of the huge castle standing tall on the mountain slope, with turrets rising into the night sky and windows twinkling under the stars. Hagrid led the students to board small boats, each accommodating 4 people. After Alaric and Hermione boarded, Harry and Ron followed. Harry and Ron warmly greeted them. The fleet set off, and along the way, there was silence. Everyone quietly admired the breathtaking view of the colossal castle approaching as they sailed across the lake. Occasionally, a sigh could be heard. After passing through a stretch of ivy, the fleet entered a dark tunnel, seemingly entering the underground of the castle. Finally, they arrived at a place similar to an underground dock and then climbed up a path of broken stones and pebbles. The new students disembarked one after another, and Hagrid led them to a massive oak door. Finally, they stood in front of Hogwarts. Hagrid knocked on the oak door 3 times, and it opened immediately. At the door was a tall black-haired witch wearing an emerald green robe. She had a serious look on her face, and she looked very difficult to deal with. "First-year students, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take it from here." Professor McGonagall nodded and led the new students further into the castle. Passing through the grand entrance hall, Professor McGonagall brought them to a small room at the other end of the Great Hall. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said. The start of term feast is about to begin, but before you take your seats in the dining hall, you'll be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because, while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. Afterwards, she briefly introduced the 4 houses, mentioned some guidelines, and then asked the new students to wait for a moment before she promptly left the room. Chapter 17, Sorting Hat Ceremony and Ghosts. As soon as Professor McGonagall left, the crowd immediately became noisy. The new students excitedly chatted, speculating about the sorting process and which house they wanted to join. "Do you think we can be sorted into Ravenclaw?" Hermione nudged Alaric, feeling a bit uneasy. Although the girl was proud, she felt a bit anxious in the unfamiliar magical world. "Of course," Alaric encouraged confidently, "I heard that Hogwarts has a talking hat. When new students put it on, it can determine the suitable house based on their personality traits." "But what if my personality doesn't fit Ravenclaw?" Hermione became even more anxious upon hearing this. In the original story, the Sorting Hat initially considered Hermione suitable for both Gryffindor and Ravenclaw but ultimately chose Gryffindor. In other words, Hermione is suitable for Ravenclaw. But in order to prevent any mishaps from happening, Alaric reminded her of the method to influence the Sorting Hat's decision. "Didn't I tell you? I heard about a method. Strong desires can change the Sorting Hat's opinion. As long as you strongly express the desire to join a particular house, the Sorting Hat will take your opinion into consideration." Hermione nodded, feeling a bit reassured. However, Ron chimed in with his opinion, "Why join Ravenclaw? Trust me, Gryffindor is the best house." His loud voice immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding new students, and he found himself overwhelmed by various responses. Some students vehemently disagreed, stating that Slytherin was the best house, while others were advocating for Ravenclaw. On the other hand, some wizard kids who favored Gryffindor loudly supported Ron. The scene became as noisy as a marketplace. Taking Hermione away from the center of the commotion, Alaric comforted her, "Don't listen to fools, you might catch their foolishness." His words amused Hermione, easing some of her inner tension. The commotion continued for quite some time, but suddenly, the noise turned into high-pitched screams. Screams akin to a horror movie scene attracted the attention of Alaric and Hermione. They turned to see Hermione's smiling face immediately vanish, replaced by her open mouth, nearly screaming. This was not just like a horror movie scene, it was an actual horror movie scene. About 20 ghosts suddenly appeared on the wall. These pearly white, semi-transparent ghosts slid across the room, talking to each other and paying little attention to the first-year students. They seemed to be arguing about something. Compared to the startled new students, Alaric was much calmer. Instead, he was interested in the physical state of these ghosts. Throughout various magical worldviews, only the ghosts in Harry Potter had normal intelligence and were not influenced by negative emotions. Apart from being able to touch and affect tangible matter differentiating them from humans, they had thought patterns similar to ordinary people. They even had their own society. In contrast, ghosts in other worlds were either of low intelligence, lacked thinking abilities, harbored hatred with thought patterns vastly different from humans, or desired reincarnation and had no attachment to reality, lacking strong emotions. Regrettably, Alaric currently lacked the ability and sufficient knowledge to study ghosts. However, he was determined to thoroughly study these ghosts one day in the future. Now, he could only comfort the nervous Hermione in a low voice. Most girls were always afraid of things like ghosts. Then, they heard the ghosts talking with the new students. "Freshmen, oh. I suppose you're ready for the test." Fat Friar smiled at them. Some students silently nodded. "I hope you get into Hufflepuff," the friar said. "I used to attend that house. Now, move forward, a thin voice said. The sorting ceremony is about to begin. Professor McGonagall returned, and the ghosts floated away, disappearing through the opposite wall. Now, line up, Professor McGonagall told the first-year students. Follow me. Following the crowd, Alaric passed through a double door and arrived at a luxurious dining hall. They never imagined such a magical, magnificent place. Students from other houses were already seated at 4 long tables, and above the tables, thousands of floating candles illuminated the dining hall. The 4 tables were adorned with glittering gold plates and tall wine glasses. At the head of the hall, there was another long table for the teachers. Professor McGonagall led the first-year students to the other side, asking them to face the senior students in a row, with the teachers behind them. Chapter 18, Sorting Hat. In the grand hall, candlelight flickered, and hundreds of faces staring at them resembled pale lanterns. Ghosts mingled among the students, emitting a faint silvery glow. Looking up, they could see the velvety black ceiling adorned with twinkling starlight. Alaric heard Hermione whisper, "The ceiling here has been enchanted and it looks like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history of the school. It was hard to believe that there was a ceiling up there, and it was equally difficult to believe that the dining hall was not open to the sky." Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first-year students, placing an old and dirty pointy wizard hat on it. Alaric knew this legendary hat well. It was the Sorting Hat. He began to look forward to the classic scene, the Sorting Hat singing its annual song that changed every year. Next, the hat started to move. A wide seam appeared around the brim, forming a mouth-like opening. The hat began to sing. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty. But don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top's hat sleek and tall. For I'm the Hogwarts Sorting Hat. And I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the Sorting Hat can't see. So try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell brave of heart. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on. Don't be afraid. And you won't get in a flap. You're safe in my hands, though I have none. For I'm a thinking cap." The song lasted for about 5 minutes, and after the Sorting Hat finished singing, the whole hall erupted into applause. However, Alaric felt that the applause was somewhat insincere. The strange song didn't seem to resonate well with the audience. The Sorting Hat bowed to the 4 tables in turn, and then it stopped moving. The formal sorting ceremony began. Professor McGonagall walked a few steps forward, holding a roll of parchment in her hands. "I will call out your names, and you will put on the hat, sit on the stool, and await your sorting," she explained. Hannah Abbott. A rosy-cheeked girl with 2 golden braids stepped forward. Alaric remembered from the original story that she later married Neville Longbottom. She stumbled out of the line, put on the hat, which conveniently covered her eyes, and after a brief pause, "Hufflepuff," the hat announced. Applause and cheers erupted from the right table as Hannah Abbott took her seat. "Susan Bones." "Hufflepuff," the hat declared again. Susan quickly joined Hannah. "Terry Boot." "Ravenclaw." The sorting continued. "Hermione Granger." After a few names, it was Hermione's turn. She practically ran to the stool, looking back anxiously. Alaric smiled, nodded at her, and she felt a bit relieved. She quickly placed the hat on her head. This time, instead of immediately announcing the house, the Sorting Hat seemed to hesitate for 2 or 3 seconds before reluctantly declaring, "Ravenclaw." Alaric applauded excitedly. Not only was he happy that Hermione was sorted into Ravenclaw, but it also indicated that the plot was not unchangeable and might suggest that the destiny represented by the plot may not even exist. The students at the second table on the left cheered and clapped. Cho Chang and Marietta stood up to welcome Hermione into their group. The Sorting Hat continued to call names, and the crowd gradually diminished. When it was Neville's turn, the boy ran to Gryffindor with his hat on, completely forgetting to take it off, which caused quite a joke. Finally, Alaric. This name attracted the attention of the wizard kids. Alaric walked out confidently, drawing the gaze of the students, especially the girls, who marveled at his handsome appearance and the stylish Mages Association uniform, different from the plain and dark cloaks of other wizard kids. Among them, it caused countless exclamations and discussions. The boys wanted to know where such a beautiful cloak came from, while the girls wanted to know who such a handsome guy was. Alaric held the Sorting Hat in his hands, feeling its slimy texture, realizing how dirty it was. Combined with the unpleasant smell emanating from it, he felt as if he were holding a rotting orange. He wanted to throw it out immediately. Suppressing his disgust, Alaric put on the Sorting Hat. As soon as it touched his head, the hat exclaimed loudly, startling everyone at Hogwarts. "This is strange. It's the first time I can't see a newcomer's thoughts." The hat's voice echoed in Alaric's mind. "In your mind, I only see a world of chaos and constant change. What have you done?" "I don't know either," Alaric replied playfully in his mind. But he realized that the experiences and training in the time tunnel had not only granted him unlimited progress in his abilities and natural talent for time and space, but also a tough and impenetrable soul. The Sorting Hat seemed to be at a loss for words, hesitating for 2 or 3 seconds before reluctantly uttering, "Ravenclaw." Alaric, feeling excited, clapped his hands. Not only was he pleased that he had successfully conveyed the idea of Ravenclaw to the Sorting Hat, but he also felt a sense of liberation, a belief that the plot could be altered and that the so-called fate might not be absolute. The wizard kids at the second table on the left applauded as Alaric confidently walked toward them. Chapter 19, Start of Term Feast. Unable to read Alaric's thoughts, the Sorting Hat couldn't make a judgment about him. After hesitating for a while, it finally yielded to Professor McGonagall's urging. Well, I'll make an exception this time. It's up to you to decide where you want to go, boy. Which house do you choose?" "Ravenclaw," Alaric replied. "Ravenclaw," the Sorting Hat shouted loudly. Then, it left a parting message in his mind, "I will remember you, child." Most Ravenclaw students were girls. When they saw such a handsome guy sorted into Ravenclaw, they erupted in joyful cheers, warmly welcoming Alaric. Alaric sat among the girls, politely dealing with their enthusiasm. Most of them wanted to get to know him, and the older students, especially the girls, were eager for a romantic date with him. Alaric had to gracefully decline one after another. During this time, he overheard Hermione and Cho Chang complaining, "Shameless." Others inquired about the source of his cloak, and Alaric introduced his design and Madame Malkin's shop to them, earning admiration and praise. This was his first time facing so many girls at once. If it were in his previous life during college, he would have been too nervous to speak. Now, however, he could handle it with ease. Of course, dealing with college girls was much more challenging than dealing with the girls at Hogwarts. The last one to cause a stir during the sorting was, of course, Harry Potter. Everyone wanted to see the boy who survived a deadly encounter with Voldemort. When he was sorted into Gryffindor, cheers erupted from that table. The Weasley twins shouted, "We've got Potter! We've got Potter!" Even the Gryffindor ghost welcomed him. The last 3 students were sorted. Lisa Turpin became a Ravenclaw. Ron Weasley was sorted into Gryffindor. Blaise Zabini was sorted into Slytherin. Dumbledore stood up, looking at the students with a smile, spreading his arms wide. It seemed that nothing made him happier than seeing the students gathered. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are: Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down. Everyone applauded and cheered. However, in reality, all the young wizards were puzzled by his last words. "What does that sentence mean?" Hermione frowned. "Never mind that," Cho Chang replied. "Dumbledore is a great wizard, just a bit crazy." "He's not crazy," Alaric interjected. "Read those words backward in Latin, and it's I am up to no good." "You know Latin too?" Hermione was extremely surprised, even dropping her pumpkin pie without noticing. "Yes, the day after I decided to go to Hogwarts, I started learning Latin," Alaric replied while enjoying a plate of roasted lamb in front of him. "I also studied ancient Celtic and Old Norse, which are historically significant and have a mythological flavor. I thought learning magic might require them, and it turns out I was right." "Old Celtic and Old Norse too? I don't even know what they are." The girls were amazed at his genius and erudition, especially Hermione. As a fellow top student, she genuinely admired Alaric, feeling defeated in the face of such a prodigy. Next was the time to eat. Alaric thoroughly enjoyed the delicious food at Hogwarts, despite the universally known fact of British cuisine. Although it was well known to the world, the wizarding world in Britain is completely different from the Muggle world. He is overwhelmed by these delicacies. Aside from being a bit too sweet, he found every dish praiseworthy. "If I were from the modern world, I would love them even more," was Alaric's final evaluation. However, even Cho Chang didn't catch the meaning. After everyone had their fill, Dumbledore casually waved his wand, and instantly, all the dishes disappeared. He stood up, and the hall returned to silence. "Oh, now that everyone is full and had enough to drink, I have a few more things to say. First-year students, be aware that the Forbidden Forest on the campus is strictly off-limits. Some older students should also take note of this. Also, Mr. Filch, the caretaker, has reminded me to tell you not to use magic in the corridors during breaks. The Quidditch tryouts will be held in the second week of this semester. Those who want to join their house teams, please contact Madam Hooch. Lastly, I must inform you all that anyone who doesn't wish to encounter accidents, painful deaths, please do not enter the corridor on the third floor to the right." The new students were in discussion, and even Hermione was asking Cho Chang for explanations. But even Cho Chang found the last rule inexplicable, claiming it was newly added this semester. Only Alaric knew that the biggest surprise of the school year would come from that corridor. However, judging by the lively discussions among the students, legends like Hogwarts' Seven Wonders were popular in both worlds. Chapter 20, School Song and Common Room. Extra Chapter. When the discussions of the young wizards subsided, Dumbledore made the next decision. "Now, before you all go to bed, let's sing the school song together," Dumbledore announced loudly. The smiles on the faces of the other teachers seemed to freeze. Dumbledore gently flicked his wand, and a long, golden ribbon floated out of it. The ribbon twisted and turned in the air above the high tables like a snake, forming lines of text. Alaric could see that these were the lyrics of the Hogwarts school song. "Choose your preferred tune," Dumbledore said. "Ready, sing." The entire student body and faculty burst into song. The sound was extremely unpleasant. Himari, who was sleeping soundly in the backpack, was awakened by the chorus, covering her ears and meowing in protest. Everyone finished singing the school song in a disorganized manner. Only the Weasley twins continued singing, following the slow melody of the funeral march. Dumbledore conducted the last few bars for them, and when they finished, his applause was the loudest. "Ah, music," he wiped his eyes, saying, "More magical than anything we do here. Now it's bedtime. Off you go to your dormitories." The new students followed their house prefects out of the great hall, through various corridors. Alaric recognized the Ravenclaw female prefect. Her name was Penelope Clearwater, with long, curly brown hair. Her beautiful appearance exuded elegance and intellect. For Alaric, her charm far surpassed Hermione and Cho Chang, who were still young. He was particularly interested in this girl who played a minor role in the original work but frequently appeared in fanfiction. Accompanied by another male prefect, they led the eaglets to the tower on the west side of the castle, the top of the Ravenclaw Tower. In front of a worn-out wooden board, there was a bronze door knocker shaped like an eagle. Unlike other houses, Ravenclaw's common room doesn't have a password. You need to answer the door knocker's question and be recognized to enter, Penelope explained. She knocked on the door, and the eagle's beak immediately opened. Instead of a bird's cry, a gentle, musical voice spoke. "What will you break once you say it? So, who would like to give it a try?" She looked expectantly at the new students, especially giving Alaric a few more glances. Although Penelope valued intellect more, she couldn't deny that she had a high initial favorability toward him due to his charming appearance. Facing the expectant gaze of the female prefect, Alaric gladly stepped forward. "Silence," he answered. "Nicely done," the eagle-shaped door knocker praised, and the door swung open. This was just a riddle game. Alaric was a bit speechless. Wasn't this door's question too easy to crack? However, in reality, due to the lack of proper basic education, most young wizards lacked logical reasoning skills. For clever Ravenclaws, riddles were often safer than passwords. Penelope nodded appreciatively at Alaric, and her favorability toward him increased significantly. This was because he not only had a charming appearance but also demonstrated intelligence. She then introduced the new students. "Congratulations. I am Prefect Penelope Clearwater. I'm delighted to welcome you to Ravenclaw House. Our emblem is an eagle soaring high above the unattainable peak. Our colors are sky blue and bronze." She went on to elaborate on Ravenclaw's achievements, characteristics, evaluations of other houses, and finally mentioned the house ghost, the Grey Lady Ravenclaw's daughter. She would provide assistance to Ravenclaw students. The Ravenclaw common room was a large, circular room with elegant arched windows on the walls, adorned with blue and bronze silk. Ravenclaw students could see the beautiful scenery outside through the windows. The ceiling was a dome decorated with stars, and the deep blue carpet beneath also had stars. There were tables, chairs, and bookshelves in the room. In a niche opposite the door was a marble bust of Rowena Ravenclaw, and the door next to it led to the dormitories above. The two prefects brought the new students to their dormitory. The dormitory was a four-person room with 4 beds, each with 4 canopy pillars, and hanging above were burgundy velvet canopies. Alaric opened his suitcase, tidied up his belongings a bit, and then placed Himari at the head of his bed. In the evening, Himari seemed energetic, rolling around on the velvet bedspread. The names of the 3 roommates were Anthony Goldstein, a blonde Jewish boy, Terry Boot, with brown hair, and Michael Corner, with black hair. They were supporting characters with names and plot lines in the original work. They, Alaric, and his 2 other dorm mates, Kevin Entwistle and Stephen Cornfoot, made up the only 6 boys in the Ravenclaw new intake. They couldn't even fill 2 dormitories. But in fact, Ravenclaw had always had more female students, so in terms of the number of male students, this year's intake already exceeded previous years. After exchanging brief greetings with their new roommates, everyone changed into their pajamas and lay down to sleep. The journey to the school was indeed exhausting.